Hello and welcome to A British Audiophile. This hobby can invoke some strong opinions on various different topics, can't it? And I think I understand some of the reasons why. People are passionate about their music, and audiophiles are not only passionate about the music, they're also passionate about the type of gear they choose to listen to that music on. So it's only natural from time to time you're going to have some heated debates. Myself, when it comes to life in general, as well as conducting myself through this hobby, I try not to form strong opinions until I'm in a position where I've got quite a bit of information. I like to make an informed choice. So why am I talking about that? Well, despite that attitude, some unconscious biases always seem to creep through, and this is one of those occasions. I started this channel over 2.5 years ago, and today I'm reviewing my first Cambridge Audio product. And the reason it's taken me so long is because of an unconscious bias. At least it was an unconscious bias up until recently. Back in the early to mid-90s, I was at university in Cardiff, and there was a local hi-fi store, a Richer Sounds hi-fi store. For those of you who aren't in the UK, Richer Sounds is the biggest retailer of hi-fi equipment on these sunny isles. I got quite friendly with the people in that store. They were nice people, and whenever I was passing by, if there wasn't somebody in the demo room, they used to allow me to drift in and have a listen to whatever was being set up. And this is around the time when Cambridge Audio had a very strong association with Richer Sounds. In fact, I think it's around the mid-90s when Julian Richer eventually wound up buying out Cambridge Audio. In any case, that store was packed full of Cambridge Audio gear, and it's quite often one of those products that was being demoed. So I got to listen to it on a regular basis, and if I'm honest, I didn't always come away with a very positive impression. I can understand why someone would go for the typical Japanese amplifier from Denon, Marantz or Yamaha. It was affordable, packed full of features with a smile kind of presentation, boosted bass and top end that was impressive in short demos. If you had more money to spend, you'd buy something from the Arcam Alpha range, which had a more mature sonic presentation. The original Audiolab 8000A was out around that time as well, which offered more detail and refinement if you could stump up the extra cash. Cambridge Audio gear at the time was more affordable than your equivalent Arcam and Audiolab, but more expensive than your typical Japanese fare. And I didn't get it. I just couldn't get my head around what you got for your extra outlay over and above those established benchmarks. So why am I talking about this now? Well, I realized recently that I had been carrying around an unconscious bias about this brand for over a quarter of a century. That unconscious bias became conscious in recent conversations that I had with Ian White. Ian White is editor-in-chief of eAcoustics. He's an industry veteran. He's reviewed gear for decades, and he's someone whose opinion I respect and trust. He spoke very fondly of Cambridge Audio products that he'd reviewed recently. So I thought it's about time I address that bias and find out whether I've had my head up my backside for the last quarter of a century, or there's some foundation to what I believed. The Cambridge Audio AXA35 retails for £349 in the UK, a full rack width unit at 430 by 335 by 83mm and 5.6 kilograms. That's 16.9 by 13.2 by 3.3 inches and 12.3 pounds in old money. The silver front fascia may be plastic, but it's nicely finished. It made me look twice and even tapped the fascia to make sure it wasn't an anodized aluminium. There's a button to take the AXA35 out of standby, adjacent to a 6.25mm quarter-inch headphone jack, IR sensor and 3.5mm auxiliary input. Below the clear OLED display are buttons to directly access each input. That's a nice touch, and yes, there's a moving magnet phono stage housed within. The menu button will allow you to adjust bass, treble and left-right balance. That'll be music to some people's ears. The rotary dial, which obviously controls the volume as well, has a nice reassuring click to it as you toggle through. Thankfully, it doesn't come with one of those credit card size remote controls. You know, the type that you find 2 days after you need it down the back of the couch. It feels good in the hand and can be used with some other Cambridge Audio devices. There are RCA connections for 4 analog inputs and a phono stage, but strangely a fixed level record out as opposed to a variable pre-out, which would have been more useful to connect to external power amps or powered subwoofers. The USB connection is for power only. That's pretty handy if you want to plug in one of those low-powered 5-volt DACs. The speaker binding posts are of basic quality. Let's give you a quick whistle-stop tour of the inside. Here we have the AC inlet filter and a fairly decent sized toroidal transformer, no VA rating, but it's a healthy size for an amplifier in this class. That little board there has the headphone jack, the IR sensor and the 3.5mm input mounted to it. And there's a board that runs behind the front display panel with that microprocessor, which presumably is for system control. On this side you have the power amplifier section. And what's nice to see is that there's lots of discrete components and a few ICs, but not any of those tiny little surface mount devices. That's nice. Those are the power supply filter caps. There's 4 of them. Each one's branded by Cambridge Audio and rated at 2,200 microfarads a piece. So that's 4,400 microfarads per channel. Now this is a relatively low powered amplifier, but that is still on the low side. I think officially Cambridge Audio rate it at 35 watts into 8 ohms. And a little bit more there in terms of power supply filter caps would give this amplifier a bit more dynamic headroom. Those 3 devices mounted to the heatsink are voltage regulators. They're responsible for maintaining a stable output voltage regardless of the input voltage and load. And there are 2 output devices mounted, which from what I can gather online, I think they're the Texas Instruments LM3886. And that would make sense. They've certainly got the right number of pins and the right rating, because the LM3886 is rated at 38 watts into 8 ohms and 68 watts into 4 ohms. So it's probably likely that it is those output devices. And over this side, where you have the various inputs, is the preamplifier section. And again, lots of discrete components, very nicely laid out. And the phono stage will be there somewhere as well, although I can't quite identify it. And that's what we have. So let me put things this way. I've been an audiophile for a long time, and perhaps that's the reason why I don't get blown away with the performance of a new product every 5 minutes. Besides, I hate that term. It just smacks of the sensationalist, over bloated nonsense that seems to be culturally acceptable these days. Apologies about that. Rant over. In any case, there are genuine cases where I'm wholeheartedly surprised by the performance of a product, and this is one of those instances. So if I'm picking cliches, not blown away, but certainly bowled over. The Cambridge Audio AXA35 offers the kind of sonic performance that I wouldn't associate with an amplifier around this price. When I consider competitors and even amplifiers up to around £700, they always drop the ball in at least one of the 3 fundamental areas of sonic performance. That becomes more obvious as you start partnering it with more expensive equipment, something that I'll talk about in a bit more detail later. But not the AXA35. Those 3 fundamental areas of sonic performance are clarity and refinement, scale and dynamics. So as you partner with more expensive speakers, they tend to be more demanding of the amplifier in terms of load. That trait becomes very obvious. And also natural tonality, or some remnants of natural tonality. The AXA35 scored very well in all regards. It isn't perfect though. It has a distinct sonic coloration that very much puts it on the warm side of the tonal spectrum. Bass is strong with weight, and the kind of impact that gives this amplifier a sense of authority in its musical presentation. Now you'd be totally forgivable at this price for the amount of heft on offer if the bass wasn't particularly well defined, but that isn't the case at all. There's actually very good bass definition, and that means that if you're listening to those phonetic percussive rhythms, this amplifier isn't going to get its knickers in a twist. If the low frequency response is surprising, the mid-range response is astonishing. And that's what sets the AXA35 apart from all its competitors in my opinion. It has real body acoustic mass, which imparts a natural tonality with an added sense of romanticism that wouldn't disgrace itself with the best amplifiers at 3 times its price. Now, this might sound like I'm raving, but I don't say this lightly. Okay, so the leading edges of notes are softened just slightly, but not enough to make it sound soft, just enough to give it a smooth kind of presentation. And the background is quiet enough, it's dark enough to allow decays to reveal themselves if they're there in the recording and the speakers are capable of reproducing them. The high frequencies are slightly recessed. When I say slightly, I mean ever so slightly. The AXA35 doesn't have the kind of presentation that when you listen to it on a short demo that you're going to be amazed by how much detail it has on offer with that showroom sparkly kind of top end. No, they've gone for something a lot more subtle and refined. The details are there, it's just not drawing your attention to them quite so obviously. Another area where this amplifier bears no relation to its price is in its sense of scale and dynamics. The soundstage is as wide as any amplifier I've heard below £1,000, and it has very good soundstage depth. Okay, imaging isn't what I'd call lockdown solid in every single location, but still very respectable. It's how separate the instruments sound and how effortlessly it's able to deal with dynamic swings without a sense of compression. That's truly remarkable. Time for some comparisons, and at £399 the IOTA VX SA3 might cost £50 more, but does come with a built-in DAC. I recognise that the built-in DAC in the IOTA is a convenient feature, but it isn't really the best quality DAC. You can certainly get better quality external DACs for around £100 these days. In terms of sonically between these two amplifiers, there's no contest. The IOTA sounds small and thin in comparison, lacking body, lacking refinement, lacking that sense of scale that the AXA35 brings. It certainly feels as if the AXA35 is operating in a class above. The Arcam SA10 does come with a very good quality internal DAC, but it's over double the price, and surely the Cambridge can't compete with that. Okay, so in order to get an external DAC for the Cambridge that's of the same quality as the one fitted inside the Arcam, you're going to wind up spending £200 or £300. Suddenly the comparison between these two amplifiers makes an awful lot more sense. And there's more similarities between them than there are differences. Tonally, they both sit on the warm side. The Arcam SA10 is a warm sounding amplifier, but I'd say the Cambridge Audio AXA35 is just a touch warmer again, a little bit more coloured in its presentation. Dynamically, and their ability to pull off information off a recording, how much clarity they have, again, they're more similar than they are different. But here, I'd have to give the nod to the AXA35. It just has better instrument separation and is able to deal with those dynamic swings with a little less compression and a sense of more ease. Also, it's a little bit darker in its background, so those decays are a little bit, just a little bit more prominent. So let's go from the sublime to the ridiculous and put it up against my favourite solid state amplifier for under £2,000, the Exposure 2510. Did it compete with an amplifier that retails for over 6 times its price? No, it didn't. The Exposure 2510 was better in all regards, as it should be. Come on guys, it's hardly fair. The 2510 has a lot less sonic coloration. It's a more neutral sounding amplifier, even though it does still have a touch of romanticism. And it's a lot more revealing of nuance, allowing you to delve a lot deeper into the recording. But the AXA35 didn't disgrace itself here either. What I love about these more traditional hi-fi products is that they're pretty much plug and play. The AXA35 does have a built-in phono stage. I didn't test it because I don't own a turntable, but it also has a distinct coloration, and I don't think it's going to be particularly fussy about the speakers that it chooses, but it is going to tailor the sound, and it's something that you do need to be aware of when you're choosing partnering equipment. I started listening tests with Acoustic Energy's excellent A100 Mark IIs that retail here in the UK for £259. Wow, wow, wow were the Synergy gods smiling. The A100s have an excellent open mid-range, so does the AXA35. They have solid, well-defined bass, and the Cambridge Audio amplifier was able to get the best out of them. They are a little bit lively on top though, combined with the slightly recessed AXA35. The match between the two was everything that I could have hoped for. In fact, I'll lay down a challenge. If someone's got that amplifier with this particular pair of speakers, I think it's going to take them an awful long time and an awful lot of money to get something significantly better. I've only just finished reviewing the Q Acoustic Concept 30s, which I thought were an awful lot of speaker for £899. They have good clarity and very strong dynamics for a speaker of their size. Tonally they sit on the warm side of neutral as well, and they can be quite demanding of amplification. Some of the amplifiers I tried with them didn't work at all, but not the AXA35. It drove them without any issue, and that's quite something given the price of this amplifier, isn't it? Tonally, you're matching a warm pair of speakers with a warm amplifier. The result is going to be a warm sound, but some people like that kind of presentation, and it wasn't a bad pairing by any means. At £1,500, the stunning Dali Minuet SEs are the best mini monitor I've reviewed, but they're demanding of partnering equipment and amplification for entirely different reasons. They have exceptional clarity and a beautiful natural tonality that's very rare. In fact, I'd place them in a class with only two other speakers that I reviewed, the ATC SEM19s and my ProAct Response 1 SCs. They're that good. They'll reveal any shortcoming in the mid-range and higher frequencies with whatever partnering equipment you place with them. And I had upstream my Auralic Aries mini streamer fed by an MCRU power supply fed into the Denafritt's Pontis DAC, so there shouldn't be any bottleneck there at least. And the AXA35 fared really well. Okay, it didn't get the best out of the Dali Minuet SEs, that would be ridiculous. I think the Exposure 2510 would be my amplifier for choice if I was choosing to build a system around that level. But in terms of amplifiers below £1,000, I can't think of anything else that I'd switch in that I think would do any better. Cambridge Audio with the AXA35 have produced an amplifier with the kind of sonic performance that I'd have considered inconceivable at this price. It has a sense of scale of easeful dynamics with richness of tone, body, all delivered with authority whilst maintaining refinement, grip and control. So where does that leave me? Blown away? Well, I'm not going to say that, am I? Bowled over? Certainly. Perhaps the best way I can describe it is this. It's genuinely shifted the paradigm of what I thought was capable for an amplifier around this price, and by no small margin. The Cambridge Audio AXA35 emphatically gets an outstanding from this channel. Okay, so I wound up with a little bit of egg on my face here, haven't I? 25 years with some unconscious negative bias towards a brand that winds up producing an amplifier that, you know, well, you've seen the review. That got me thinking. What do you think have been the biases that have stopped you along your journey progressing? I'd love to hear about them in the comment section. All that remains for me to say is if you like this video, if you like what I'm doing with this channel and you want to see it grow and you haven't done so already, please do all that social media stuff. Check me out on Patreon for consultancy services, bonus content. Lovely if you can join the ABA club and we can chat face to face on our video calls. But for today, for now, a British audiophile signing off.